Hi there. I'm with Sabrina Verjee, and we're going to have a talk about how we kind of prepare and run in multi-day events, because Sabrina, you've got Cape Wrath Ultra
Yep.
in just over a week's time, and she's obviously recently completed the Wainwright, so lots of experience in fueling, looking after herself and making sure that she's does the right things in the right orders. So where do you want to start? Should we start with preparing for the day?
Yeah, so we're about just over 2 weeks away, and I've started to think about how to get everything packed into the 79-litre pack that's got to contain everything, all the clothes I want to wear, all the stuff I'm going to sleep in, and all my fuel for the 8 days, which actually I'm realising that most of this bag is going to be my food for 8 days. It's quite a lot. So I did a little spreadsheet to calculate how much nutrition and what I'm going to take in to keep the calories coming in. And I was shocked at how much I will actually need for these 8 days. So I put it together and I calculated I would probably consume about 50 mountain fuel jellies. So if you're packing, it's a lot. I counted them out, and I've got a mixture. I quite like the orange ones. These new raw flavoured, sort of natural flavour caffeine ones are absolutely brilliant because they don't have any taste. But you can't just have caffeine gels because you'd overload on the caffeine. So I've got a mixture, and I've got a few of the lime ones, lemon and lime.
So how many of those a day will you consume?
So not every day is the same length. So I looked at the different days. So the first day will probably be around 3 hours. So I'll probably have 3 jellies.
So,
I think I've
so,
packed 5,
so have you
actually.
kind of allowed kind of 1 an hour?
Yeah, well, in an ideal world, I would have 3 an hour.
Yeah.
But if you try to carry all of that and just consume jellies as your only carbohydrate, then probably you're going to end up in a mess by the end. So you do need to mix it up a bit. So I'll have some other foods that are probably a bit drier, which aren't as easy to eat while I'm running, but contain a more dense amount of calories. So your typical, again, your amount of fuel bars might be a good version of that. I like Pop-Tarts. Anything really. Nuts are really good, high energy food that you can take
good
along
calories.
with the jellies. So you've got to mix it up a little bit. And then I also thought about getting more fuel in, easy fuel, and balancing my electrolytes, which is really important. So what I do is I probably won't have a hard bottle like this, but I'll have soft flasks, and I'll need to take with me on the hills some sachets like this. And again, I've calculated I'll probably want about 30 of these sachets, and I'll each night I'll sort of set my bottles up for the next day, and I'll take a big one like this and put. So I start with 2 bottles of an electrolyte balanced drink with energy in it as well, because you're just trying to.
So you basically prepare your bottles the night before for the following morning.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're ready.
So the way it works is although some of the days are short, so the first day, as I said, might only be 3 hours, and we start a bit later, and you might have a long time in camp, 5-6 hours, but it's easy. That time just slips away. You run in, and actually you need to refuel. So as soon as you get in, it's really important to get everything back in the body. So I'm also taking a large pack of recovery to just mean I just drink more. I'm going to have to really rehydrate. But it also has your proteins and just helps you reset for the next day. And then you just stuff in as much food as you can. So I literally get in, take my pack off, eat, drink, then unpack the day's pack. So take out all the rubbish, any clothes that you've taken. So it's raining and it's got wet, put them out to dry. Take off your shoes and socks so your feet can dry. And just check if there's any sore spots on them, a bit of talc or dress something, anything, just so that they can be in as good a shape for the next day. And then repack the vest again with what you need for the next day. So your mandatory kit, and And one thing I would just say is I always pack one of these guys, a little disposable poncho. They're an absolute lifesaver. So they're really lightweight, they're cheap, so everyone can afford them. Just fit into the side of your vest, and if it suddenly starts a heavy downpour, you already have your light waterproof on, and you just stick the poncho on top. And it stops your race vest getting wet.
Yes, that goes over everything.
It goes over everything, and
Yeah.
you can put it on in seconds. So if the weather changes quickly, you haven't got to take your pack off and find your waterproof in it. It's just in an accessible side pocket.
Yeah.
And then you can throw it on. And it actually, if it has got also a little bit cold, I get cold very easily. It keeps your body heating. So if you've just been running hard and all that heat is emanating off you, if you put the poncho on, it all retains in there and keeps you nice and warm. But equally, if you're too hot but you need it to not get wet, it's ever so easy just to lift it and ventilate as well. I just think they're brilliant. And if you can keep your waterproof a bit drier, I mean, not trying to keep your waterproof dry, but it's sort of, a waterproof.
Save it for when it's really
exactly.
needed.
And if you run in a waterproof, you want it to be breathable. So anything breathable, obviously, at some point can also let water in. I mean, your water out equals water ability to get in too. So that's why I use the poncho, which is just bomb-proof.
Yeah.
So that's my little tip for that. The other tip I have, you see it's really hot sunshine. August, we could have it baking hot like this. Now, do you really want to slather yourself in sun cream all day? What I do is, I always run on the ultras with long sleeves. The reason I do that is one, like I'm not going to get sunburnt on my arms, a bit more protection also around the back of the neck. I don't want to run with sun cream all over me. It stops me sweating. And then, if you do want to cool down, you can roll the sleeves up. So make sure you've got sleeves that do roll up. And equally, it works the other way. So it might be baking hot like this, but if it cools down, I can just roll the sleeves down and a bit warmer.
Or even, to be honest, if you've got a long layer like that and you get to a water source, stream, checkpoint, whatever, you can dunk yourself in, and that's going to retain the cool water for far longer than if it's just on your skin, potentially washing all your sun cream off, so you're going to burn anyway. Yeah.
Indeed. And I talked about feet. Obviously, your feet are so important. Skin has the largest number of pain receptors, so if you get blisters in your feet, that's going to be by far more painful than any other problem you're going to have. So let's try and prevent blisters. I mean, you take kit, mandatory kit, to have something in the evening camp to fix blisters, but hey, if you don't have them to begin with, life's better. I really do recommend waterproof socks. Dexshell now make these ones, which they really feel like a nice sock.
They're not heavy.
They're not heavy. These are ultra thin.
Yeah.
And also you do want a long one, because if you go into water, you are going to go in bogs or whatever that are a bit higher than your ankle. So ankle socks are not ideal, but a bit longer. And if you're hot, you just roll them down again. I quite like rolling things up and down. Again, it's useful, like if you're going to go, I don't really know the terrain very well, but we might be going through quite high vegetation that is, has ticks and stuff. There might be stuff that's going to prick your legs. Well, a waterproof membrane is going to stop ticks getting in. It's going to stop you getting scratches on your legs and things, which, you might not mind if you're going out for a 2-hour run, but for 8 days, scratches
hammering
and things,
through the heather. And,
you could... you could get quite sore after that.
And as well, I presume if it's high, it's also helping to stop those little stones, those little bits of mud, those things from getting down into your shoes, onto the soles of your feet.
So you keep your feet clean and dry, and therefore you prevent any, or reduce the chance of blisters. And if your shoes are nicely cushioned and they fit well, I use the La Sportiva Mutants, and I've been using them since I started ultra running about 6 or 7 years ago now, and I haven't found a better shoe yet. They've just come out with Cyclones. They have a nice little slip around which also would stop stuff getting in. But I haven't had a big chance to use them yet. They may be the best in the Mutant, but I love the Mutants. So that's those. We just talked about, if you are unfortunate enough to get a blister, I personally, I mean, everyone has their own way of dealing with them, but what I do is I take obviously I'm a vet, so I can get hold of these, but I'm sure you can find them anywhere, a 25 gauge needle, so tiny, it's like an insulin syringe type needle, and you just pop the blister. And actually, some people like go ahead and squeeze everything out, but actually, if you just pop it, when you're running on it, it will just squeeze out. The fluid's just because from the compression. And then I find it's no longer a problem. I don't do anything else. I don't dress it, nothing.
So when you pop it, do you put the needle through two sides of skin kind of thing, or just literally
No,
put it
I
in? Just put it in,
pop.
right? Yeah.
If it's a bit, sometimes there are two compartments, you do need to pop both of them.
Yeah.
But that's it, that's all I do.
Yeah. So you don't talcum powder, Vaseline.
So in an evening, I think if your feet have got wet, you probably would want a bit of talc, and I quite like this mainly because it's a small pot, to be honest. Medicated talc for fungal infections. If your feet are wet for 8 days, you could get fungal infections. I have had it on adventure racing. It's that skin at the bottom, if you look, and it has tiny pinholes in.
Right. Okay.
That's generally a sign of little guys growing in there.
Yeah.
Or trench foot, and you've got the wrinkles.
Yeah.
So that's good. You can lube between your toes, just a sort of skin barrier, and that means that they'll then just slide nicely rather than catching on each other. That's good. Obviously, you want to make sure you've cut your toenails. I have, been on various runs and realised I've got one pointy bit of nail that's then caused it to bleed, and you're like, oh, that was hurting. You take your socks.
So if you feel like a hot burn, or you feel that you've got something in your shoe that's rubbing, do you think you need to kind of stop and remove it, or try to manage it there and then, or do you kind of give it longer?
Yeah, so I think if you're just coming into camp, it's better to deal with things there. But if you've got like another 5 hours or something to get to camp, or longer, you probably want to deal with it there and then to stop a massive, a small problem turning into quite a massive loss of skin or a larger painful area. So I use this stuff. It's just some sticky, very thin layer that can just put over the area that's getting rubbed if it's early days, so that the rub is rubbing this rather than your skin, allows the skin just to settle back down. And I have nice large pieces like this, because there's nothing worse than if you put a tiny little piece on and it rubs all the movement while you're running, and then ends up as actually something at the bottom of your sock that causes another rub.
Yeah.
That's no good at all. And then you've got your standard blister hydrocolloid sort of plasters. I don't really use these very often, because as I say, I normally just pop the blisters and I'm away.
And then
But I know other people like them in a mandatory kit, so I have them. That's about it, really.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that's enough for folk to kind of hopefully get something out of this, so when they're kind of preparing for a multi-day or Cape Wrath, or even just a few days up in the lakes or Wales or Scotland, when they're going away for a trip, just knowing what little tips are going to help them to make sure they enjoy the following day. Because you might have a good day one day, but if you haven't looked after yourself, the next day could be horrendous, couldn't it? And I suppose it's about taking all these different measures to ensure that each day that you have is a good day. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
And hope you enjoyed that.